And I'm going to go ahead and introduce Burke Franklin, who's a well-renowned business coach and advisor. Today, he's going to be talking to us about how to pitch your business to investors and the mindset that you need to have when doing so. So go ahead, Burke.
All right, let me put on my other thing here. See how my share goes with you. And we need to play this thing. Where's my play?
It's always that moment before. It's like, will it work this time?
I know, right? Please work this time just once, yeah. All right. Well, nice to meet you guys. Business Power Tools. I've been in business about 30 years doing this, but 40 years altogether. And it started out. I was in Silicon Valley, many years ago. I'd worked for Texas Instruments. I got a degree in business. I got a job at Texas Instruments, selling electronic components in Orange County. My electrical engineering start in college was part of it, but it enabled me to. I was selling, all kinds of TI components and things in Orange County, and working with engineers. And my favorite account was Fender Musical Instruments, and along with then Music Man, we sold electronic parts to their amps and stuff, and that was the rock and roll part of the business was fun. But then, I was also dealing with purchasing managers, which I really found not as interesting as dealing with engineers. I thought, well, these guys have all the power. Why don't I go and become a purchasing manager? And I managed to wangle a job of all places at the Sharper Image Catalog, if you remember that. I became the electronics buyer at the Sharper Image Catalog. And that was like, the amazing job. It's like if you're not familiar with it, it was a kind of a guy gadget catalog full of all kinds of cool, bright, shiny objects, and which was really fun. But then, then they graduated me or promoted me to the catalog department because I was really good at explaining the technological parts of the products to the customers, and they had me become a copywriter. So I started doing that. And along the way, I discovered a really cool word processor in Silicon Valley. I thought, I could go back into sales selling these things and make a lot more money. And so I sold word processors for a couple of years. And then, of course, PCs and Macs came along and wiped out word processors altogether. And I found myself in Silicon Valley wondering what am I going to do next, and how can I take everything that I've already done and experienced and parlay that into the next thing. And I started making sales promotional materials for high-tech companies in Silicon Valley. I made data sheets and made a catalog for a friend, and he was freaked out because he was used to printing his catalogs in black and white. And I convinced him to make it in color, which cost him about 4 times as much, but he made 10 times the money, so that worked out really well. And then one day a friend of mine called me up and said, I've got a deal going with Apple. They want to buy my engineering software to use it for themselves. And what they wanted, what they knew was the SBA had done a survey at the time, and they said, what they discovered was that 60% of the businesses that failed, they were looking at the companies that failed, and wondering why. And they said, so if they found out that 60% of the businesses that failed had no business plan. So it's simple as that. And so Apple figured, well, we need this guy to stay in business because you got to support the product and develop the product and all that kind of stuff. Let's see your business plan because we want to see what you got. Anyway, so we scrambled and we put this whole thing together. And I knew from the Sharper Image catalog days that people needed to have all the information in one place at one time. They weren't going to come back and ask questions and then buy. If they had all the information in front of them right there, they could make a buying decision. And this was a complicated decision for Apple. And I knew from selling word processors that you sell different people in the company the same product a different way, kind of sort of. So like you'd sell the user of the word processor all the great features of the product. You'd sell the manager who managed the users, that how all their people are going to be happy using it. You'd make a deal with the CFO who just wants to know the numbers. And of course, the CEO just wants to know, is everybody going to be happy? Am I going to make more money? Is this going to be a much better deal? And all that. So we knew that Apple had different people, of course, all over the organization. We didn't know who they were, but we knew they had different biases, different perspectives. And we really built the business plan kind of like a catalog where they could just go in and find the stuff they wanted to see and make sure everything was being done well. Long story short, we got the deal. But over the next year, people were coming to me saying, I need help with my business plan. And they had some really great ideas. And so I discovered that really there's all these people with these great ideas. Like, wow, if I could help them turn that into a business and just get their business plan right so the investors would fund it, which I did, and it worked really well. And the other thing I noticed along the way in putting these together is that a business plan really pretty much all share a pretty fundamental structure. And I'll show you some things on that in here as we go. And so then one day after doing this for about a year, I thought if I see one more crappy business plan, I'm going to scream. And I'm in the shower in 1988, and I thought to myself, why don't I just take all this content I've got that I've written for these people, redact anything that was proprietary, of course, but leave it in. And I created this Word template that people could use to just write the business plan themselves. And it wasn't like there was no fill in the blanks, because whatever I redacted, I replaced with a variety of multiple choice sentence endings. With the idea was that it's easier to edit than it is to write from scratch. So if they see a blank sheet of paper, they have no idea what to say. But if they see something written, they say, well, I'd say it like this, or I'd do it like that, which gave them the impetus to get it done. And so that thing took off. It was amazing. And I added, a marketing plan, picked up where the business plan left off. We added an employee handbook. We added a safety plan. We added a PR plan with a bunch of press releases. And of course, a whole bunch of sample contracts and a whole bunch of Excel models that have been added to it. And then so along the way, so at one point I was in about 3,500 stores with a dozen products, doing about 12 million in sales with 30 employees. So I tell you all that to explain that how I got here actually makes some sense. It was, I wouldn't say unconscious. It was, I just kept using what I had and parlaying it forward, and built the business based on what people really needed, what they used, and what worked. And of course, I used everything myself too. I had one of my sales contracts is one of those ones where I'd hired a friend and he came and worked for me, and I was paying him $5,000 a month, and he worked for 9 months and didn't do anything. And a consultant I'd talked to, he said, Burke, never carry somebody longer than their mother did. And so after 9 months, he was gone. Anyway, let's move into the show here. I just wanted to show you where I was coming from.
Hey, real quick, Burke, it looks like your slideshow is in presenter's view.
What does that mean? Does that mean you're seeing the two shows on the slide, you're not seeing the main one?
Yep.
Oh, hang on a second. How do I do that?
There should be a little button on the top. That
I think maybe my share is, I'm not sharing it right. Let me redo the share here.
You may have to enter full screen on that one, and then Alt Tab, and then share the screen.
Yeah. Huh. Let's escape it a second here and come back. So screen share. Maybe I'll just do desktop 1 where the main thing is showing, and then we restart this. Where's my mouse? Come back.
It's that thing that we were joking about.
I know, right? Now my mouse isn't crossing over to the other screen. God, come on, seriously. All right, hold on. So wait a minute. So let's see. Let me put this on share there. Put this on play here. How about now?
Perfect. Looks good to me.
And everybody's in it, so we're good. All right. So the idea here is I go back. I started 500 years ago. Christopher Columbus, 1492. His fundamental problem in the world, his idea is, I'm going to find a trade route to India because there's got to be a better way to get stuff. And he had a fundamental problem that, of course, some of you may have this issue as well, where you've got this idea and everybody in the world disagrees with you. And so he's got to get past a fundamental concept that people just, nobody buys it. And so, the big business plan is, I don't really have a plan. It's going to get some guys and some boats, and I'm going to sail west and keep going. And ideally, if the Earth really is round, I'm going to go around the other side and come up to India, and we're going to achieve the objective here. And so, the idea is bring home lots of gold. And so, of course, the story. He went to Queen, I think it was Isabel of Portugal. Finally, I don't know how many times he pitched it. He had no business plan. He certainly didn't have any software. But this was the idea. And I just bring it up because 500 years ago, here's a guy who overcomes odds that are otherwise, insurmountable, I would say, compared to what we're doing today, and anything we're doing today. So if he could do it, we can pull it off. And then I love this by Stan Lee of Marvel Comics. If you have an idea that you genuinely think is good, don't let some idiot talk you out of it. And more often than not, we get our friends and family are trying to protect us and telling us, do you realize that 4 out of 5 businesses fail in 5 years? And and the thing is, when you look at the SBA stats, or if you look at the definition of what failure is, in there are if you sold the company, if you just decided to do something else. Real failure to me is when you've done everything you possibly can and it just won't fly. Well, okay, the business failed. But I think of Oculus Rift that sold to Facebook for $3 billion. That was sold within 5 years for $3 billion. I'll take a $3 billion loss like that all day long. So some of these stats about businesses failing, I don't think are quite fair. But anyway, that's just to keep that. All what I'm talking about here, really, I think it's a lot of mindset stuff, if you will, about things that I just see over and over again and hear from people who are looking to raise capital and build their businesses. And sometimes you don't need to raise capital. I'll show you later on, I'll tell you a story later on how a customer, didn't raise capital but got what he needed without it. And that's one of the places I'd like to want to emphasize a little bit. Here is Walt Disney. People often ask me, what's it gonna take? How long is this? How much work am I gonna have to do? I even have people say to me, well, don't you just put like a time limit on, like, I'm gonna give it a year, I'm gonna give it a couple years, and then if it doesn't happen by then, I'm out. And every entrepreneur I've ever talked to, no one ever thinks like that. It's not a matter of how long is it gonna take. You're just gonna keep going. You're gonna do this no matter what. And so Walt Disney pitched Disneyland 600 times. Can you imagine that? Pitching your business plan 600 times. This is Walt Disney. This is after he'd made movies. This is after he had a famous cartoon. Now, obviously, this is a radical departure from everything he was doing, but nevertheless, it's Walt Disney who pitched it 600 times. Colonel Sanders, Kentucky Fried Chicken. He pitched it 1,100 plus times. And he drove around. He started at 65 with I think it was his Social Security retirement, and just hit the road and cooked chicken. And finally, someone says, "Okay, let's open up a chicken restaurant." And then you got the guys, Chicken Soup for the Soul, Jack Canfield and Mark Victor Hansen. They went to 153 different editors or publishers before they got Chicken Soup for the Soul published. So it takes a lot. And I remember there was a blog that I responded to that a woman had written, and she was complaining. So I've pitched a dozen investors, and apparently they just don't like women. And I thought, oh, you've only been to a dozen. These guys have been to 600, 1,100, 153. It takes a while to figure out, and maybe the investors she's talked to didn't like women. I don't know. But more often than not, they might not like your deal. They might just like, I've overinvested in that stuff. They may not like her. But the whole trick, I can imagine Walt Disney in the process of this has found that, and even for myself in raising capital, at some point you finally get your deal dialed in, you get your audience dialed in, and you get the right deal in front of the right audience, and boom, you get the investor. So it's a numbers game. I hate to say it that way, but it really kind of is. You just got to keep going and keep refining what you're doing, figuring out who is it that's amenable to my deal. What can I do to improve my offer? What can I do to improve my presentation? And much of the investment happens in the conversations you have with the investors after your formal presentation. And I'll get to that in a minute. I already told you a little bit about me. I said, not to fear, the cavalry is here, or your knight in shining armor has appeared to help you out with this. I gave you my background here on this already, but a little bit about me. Anyway, so there's 3 things that basically these investors want to know. And I hear this over and over again, and it's really kind of about your product and everything. It's why your product at all, why now, and why from you. And all of these things are important, and so there's some things to consider in this. And the sequence of the raising money kind of goes like this. You've heard it before. You got an elevator. You're in the elevator, the proverbial elevator. Now I would expand that to meaning you're at the conference buffet line was going to be the new elevator, really. And you give the elevator pitch, and then there's the 2 to 3 page executive summary, because the investor is going to say, these guys they read so many business plans, but they don't want to. You'll hear that they don't want to read business plans, and they really don't until they're ready to invest. I'll put it that way. So what you've got is this two to 3 page. I'll keep it to 2 pages if you can, like one piece of paper printed both sides. That would be your ideal thing, I think, because then it has a perception of just one piece of paper. But they'll indulge that just in case you've got something, because these investors pray every day to their God for somebody to please walk in the door with a deal they can fund, because that's how they make their money. It's what they do. They invest. And so what you want to do, you're ready with your elevator pitch, the 30-second pitch. Then you have your 2-page summary, which they'll read, and then this whole thing is to get the appointment to come in and give them the proverbial investor pitch, and use your pitch deck and pitch to the partners if it's a VC firm, or even just an angel. Go to their office or invite them to your office and explain to them what you're doing. And then if and when they're interested, they're going to want to see your comprehensive plan, because this is where you're going to answer all the questions. And if you've watched Shark Tank, which I'm sure you have, there's invariably a moment in the show where one of the contestants is floundering, and Damon John or Mark Cuban or one of them says, "Do you have a business plan?" Because they know if the person had a business plan, they would have thought through all this stuff, and they would be able to answer the questions. So how do you get there from here? Well, you do it in reverse order. I say start with a comprehensive strategic plan, because that's just strategic. It's not just a business plan. It's really a catalog of all the things that need to be done. You've got some plan Bs in there, like you're thinking, okay, if this doesn't work, we'll do that. I even ask questions like, if something, there's the proverbial question, if somebody asks, well, if you get hit by a bus, what happens to the business? Well, that happened in Silicon Valley many years ago. It was Eagle Computer. The company went public. The CEO went out and bought the obligatory Ferrari, was celebrating with champagne. Guess what? Wrapped the Ferrari around a tree and killed himself. And Eagle Computer, well, they're no longer. And so that's one of those questions you need to address. And a lot of people don't think about that. And it's a simple question: what happens if you get hit by a bus? And the answer is even just as simple. 1A, we've got key person insurance to pay you to assure that, the company is whole. You don't lose any money because you lose me. And B, I've got a team. So that's not to worry, because that's just one of those things that's life. It's something to consider and something you got to think about. So you go backwards, and then you boil it down to your elevator pitch. And that's really where you come to. And doing the whole plan, I think, really is the key ingredient, is because these guys see, a foot-high pile. I won't say a foot high. It's more like a 50-foot-high pile, probably, of business plans every year, and they fund maybe a handful of them. And so the fundamental questions really are. This is my only slide with this much text on it, so don't worry. I'm not doing this on every slide. But think about this, why are you here? What's the big deal? They want to know how big this business can become. It's what are you selling? How are you structured? How does it make money? I mean, it's a pretty straightforward. These are the plain English version of all of these questions. And so this is really, and you can, on my business plan template, you can shuffle the order and change any order you want to have it in. But the idea here is, think about the logic of all these questions. Who are your competitors? And some people say, we have no competitors. You probably heard many times from business plan people or business investors saying, you've got competitors. A roofing contractor has got competitors, not only in other roofing contractors, but it's a swimming pool contractor. It's a college education. It's a new car. It's a new room on the house. So it's indirect competitors as well. So this comes back to why your product, why now, and then of course why from you. And so this is where one of the questions would be asked would be, what's a nice person like you doing in a business like this? And this, I'll get this in a moment, but that's another important question to consider. What is your background? What is it about you that makes you special? And this is where these guys ask some of the tough questions. And I remember, these are just some simple ones like, prove it. Give me an example. What are you talking about? And this really came from an ancient history professor I had. I thought I wrote these brilliant papers, talking about why did Hannibal cross the Alps and this and that. And I would get these horrible red marks all over my documents, all over my essays, saying, prove it. What are you talking about? Give me a date, name some people, and explain why. And I realized, wow, I can't BS my way through this thing. You can't BS your way through a business plan like you might have been able to do with a college paper. These people are betting the farm, betting money on it. And it's not just your deal, they're looking at a bunch of other deals. So you've got to have your deal rise to the top. And you've got to think about what these people are looking for and have the answers to the questions in here. And over the last 30 years, I've evolved this plan where we've added questions to it. Mostly just comes in from people asking questions and thinking, we got to add that in there. Or myself, I've pitched investors and raised capital. So, and I get the questions, I'm thinking, oh my God, I should have thought of that, kind of a thing. So a lot of this stuff gets baked in, and it's stuff I'll go over here. And so one of the things I think about is, there's the difference between the missionary and the mercenary. And so this is where we answer the question, what's a nice person like you doing in a business like this? And the thing about missionaries is they typically want to save the world and just give me the money. I'll save the world. I'm going to do this thing. But they suck at business. They don't think business-wise. They just want to save the world, which is great. The good news is about these guys is that they'll go down with the ship. They'll stay with it no matter what. And then on the other end of the spectrum, you've got mercenaries who are in it for all about the money. Now, if you could combine the Goldilocks combination of the missionary and the mercenary, so you can have both aspects of this, where the mercenary's got there's a personal reason, there's something personal behind it. I know of a person who was a doctor and became a doctor because he saw something happen, like his brother died or something like that. I don't ever want to see that happen again ever. And so if you can come up with like a personal reason, like in my own case, I saw some really great ideas. Like, wow, these could be businesses. You've got to do this, and we've got to get you funded. We've got to get you in business. We've got to make this thing happen. And so there's that part of it. And then of course there's the mercenary. Well, the mercenary needs to, in this case, grow a heart, and the straw man needs to grow a brain, and then there's the lion who needs to have some cojones. So it's kind of like all three of these characters you need in your mindset. And if you can get all that together, where if you're a missionary type and you want to save the world, well, that's great, and investors love that. You got to demonstrate you've got business skills, or certainly someone on your team who does. And likewise, if you're a mercenary type, because what scares the investors about mercenaries is that, well, you could go get a better deal down the street and you leave, even though you're a great business person. You might get a better deal and you're gone, and this business flounders because of it. So you want to have kind of the combination of the missionary and the mercenary there. The other thing too, I find that I got into trouble way back when, and trouble meaning like my business was floundering, thinking, what am I going to do, and I got out my own business plan, and it really rekindled my sense of what I was doing, what I was about, why I was doing it, all the assets I'd built along the way, all the customers that I'd had, all this promise that this thing had. So, because when you get knocked down, and by the way, for what it's worth, I started karate lessons when I started my business 30 years ago. And I really started to see, you can't be in the ring when you're sparring with somebody. When you're in there, you got to be in there with your heart, mind, body, and spirit. You can't have anything left out. You've got to be all in. And so when you get knocked down, like I say here, knocked down 7 times, you got to get up 8. That's part of Disney's 600 times pitching it. You just get up and you keep going. And I'm going to sort of switch back and forth and just throw a bunch of ideas at you here that are they all go into the soup of your business and pitching investors, but they're things to consider. And so you've got to learn from your investor presentations, learn from what they tell you. One of the adages is if you go in and ask an investor for money, you'll get advice. If you ask for advice, you'll get money. So that's just something to maybe keep in mind, is run it by them. I've got this business idea. What do you think of this thing? Don't ask them for money, but ask them what they think of what you're doing. And that could go a long way to getting you the money, because obviously you're a person who's open to learning. You're open to input. I think that's one of the big things I found when I would put my wallet back or checkbook back in my pocket, is when the entrepreneur is not open to input. Many angel investors want to invest in businesses because they can see how their contribution can make a difference to this business. Not just the money they're going to invest, but their presence and their skill and their knowledge and experience and contacts can help this business a lot and make their money go a lot further, which is why they'd want to invest, because they can make this business go. So, another topic here. Another thing I found is in many of these 20-minute investor presentations, I've seen people take an entire 15 minutes of that 20 minutes selling the product. They're pitching the product. It's so easy to do because we're so excited about our product and we want to sell our product. We're really good at selling the product. We think if we sell the product, then the investor will invest in the company. And they don't think that way. Okay, product, I get it. If I was a customer with that problem, I'd probably pay the price. I'd buy your product. Tell me about the business. I'm investing in the business. I'm buying stock in the company. I want a revenue share in your business. I want something in this business. And so I, of course, equate it to the idea of, are you selling Cokes or are you selling the Coke machine? And you really want to, there's going to be a slide in your presentation that's all about the product. So don't short shrift the product pitch, but you can't dwell on it. It's just, that's the product. Make sure you nail the product and then continue on with the rest of the presentation about the business itself. And it's answering those, well, I had showed 18 questions, but I'll call it 20 questions in there that just follows the logic throughout the whole thing. So here's another thing too to consider. A lot of people think, well, I don't want to write a business plan. It's too much work. I don't know how. I don't want to do it. Can I just go put together a nice pitch deck and a smile and go raise money? Well, here's the thing. So let's say they want to invest, and you can convince them that your business, depending on whatever number metric you want to use, like it's sort of the 900,000, or I'm just using the simple numbers for the math here. But if I had a business and I could convince you that my business was worth $9 million and you invested $1 million, you get 10%. Now, notwithstanding all the other things that go attached to venture capital deals that change it up that you got to pay attention to. But let's just say I could convince you that my business is worth $19 million and you invest $1 million. Now you only get 5%. And so is it worth, it to write the business plan to have your business be worth an extra $10 million and only give up a 5% instead of 10%? So this is really, I would say this is part of my pitch to say it's worth it to write a business plan. However many weeks it takes, if it takes pitching it 600 times, you're going to get good at this explanation. You're going to get good at it, and it's worth it. This is the part where I think that it monetizes the value of writing your business plan, not to mention coming up with a good pitch for the investors to be inspired to invest in your deal and your team versus somebody else. Another thing I think about here is profit. And this is where some people just think this is sort of for the nonprofit folks, but some people are thinking, well, I don't know. I don't fucking make a profit. Is profit good? Is profit stealing? Is profit bad? Now many of us entrepreneurs go, no, we want the profit. That's the whole point, was to make a profit. And that's where most of us are. But for those of us who are a little freaked out about, kind of worried about, is profit a good thing? Well, think about it. Profit is what you're bringing. I say what you're bringing to the party. It's the value that you add to the businesses. What are you doing that's taking all these raw ingredients and combining them together and making this business? And that's where the profit is. You deserve the profit to make. And of course, that's what investors want to see, is that this thing is making a profit, and you want to get to where you're making a profit as soon as possible. Another piece to talk about that's important is your management team, of course. And so I read a book it was Howard Schultz. He's the founder of Starbucks. And it's the book, Pour Your Heart Into It. And he talks about, right about the middle of the book, he made this statement. I went, oh my God, this is perfect. And he says, what I'm looking for at Starbucks is someone who's got a passion for coffee and the coffee experience. That means your CFO can't be a teetotaler, because the CFO is going to wonder, why are we spending all this money on coffee beans when we can get a cheaper deal somewhere else? No, because if you have a passion for coffee and the coffee experience, you want the best beans, you want the best looking place, you're going to build a Starbucks. And that's really what I think worked for them. So if you can figure out a way for yourself and have this be one of the filters in using and hiring your team and assembling your team, is that they have a passion for what you're doing and what you're doing experiences. So my people have a passion for helping entrepreneurs and for building business and the whole entrepreneurial experience. And so I work with people who are doing exactly that and work for themselves. Another thing I learned from an attorney in Silicon Valley, it's always good to take your attorney's advice when it's something as simple as this, and that's simply designing your business where you all get rich the same way. For example, if you and I bought a building and we wanted to fix it up, and I said, I want to fix it up and sell it, and you said, I want to fix it up and lease it, we got a problem. I mean, it's not a big catastrophic thing, but there's a conflict of interest right there. We're not getting rich the same way. We're going to get rich differently, but wouldn't it be better if we were on the same page and went into this thing where everybody's getting rich the same way, so you're not building in conflicts into how you're building your business. So you want to have investors who are going to get rich the same way you want to get rich. So I could talk about revenue royalties later on, because that's where you keep the business and the investors get a share of the revenue royalties, and they're not in a hurry for you to sell it. Otherwise, if they have stock in the business, well, anyway, they want to get out of it. So transparency is huge. There's a lot of talk about transparency these days. And the other thing, I've been talking about this for, 20 years. I didn't even use the word. Well, actually, I jumped ahead. Sorry. If you need to get rid of somebody, you got to get rid of somebody. You can't wait around and think, well, I'll work with them. Like I told you about, the consultant told me, you've got to, if you can't carry somebody longer than their mother did. And I carried this guy way too long. I paid way too much money. And the icing on the cake was he came back in a year and he sued me for $1 million. So, now I have an employment agreement that's worth about, I don't know what it's worth. He didn't win the lawsuit, but it cost me about 80 grand to make this guy go away. And he was a friend from college, a fraternity brother, but the idea here was terminating with dignity. In his case, he got the boot. He was just so pissed off I could scream. But basically, terminating with dignity means you really want to have whoever you're letting go, you gotta let them save face. You don't do some kind of egocentric, screaming, yelling, histrionic, crazy thing, firing somebody, because that's the part where they come back and sue you. If you do it with dignity, they can graciously leave the company, make sure it works for them, works for you. Sometimes it's not going to work for them as much as they want it to, but you know what? This would be the prime directive here in letting somebody go and firing one of your team members, because it's inevitable someone doesn't work out. You've got to be able to do it. And I beat this to death because this is a very, very expensive concept here if you don't do it right. And it's very important to do that. The other thing I was going to get to here is that your company itself is a product. Many people just get into their business, they bought themselves a job, or they've started a company to create a job without really the sense of someday I'm going to sell this thing. And because someone's going to, of course, want to buy your business. And that's really probably the easiest and most favorable exit strategy is an acquisition. Sure, you could take it public, and there's certainly many instances where that's the way to go. That's what investors want to do, and you may enjoy the process of doing that, and it can be wildly lucrative. There's enough examples. But either way, think of your company as the product, because even if you did take it public, everybody's going to want to see that you're buttoned up behind the scenes. You've got your act together. Different ways of saying that, but that's what you got to do. And on the subject of management team, I never used the word diversity before. Of course, that's the huge thing these days. And what I loved about it, and I talked about this even in the video in my business plan, the Biz Plan Builder, there's a video that goes with each section. And the section on the management team is where I'm talking about, I was on a panel of a bunch of investors. There's three venture capitalists and me on this panel at the University of Texas business plan competition. And so these guys are pitching it, and there was a team of guys. They all looked like me, young white guys, golf shirts, like that thing. And I'm not a golfer. I'm not wearing a golf shirt, but anyway, that's what they look like. And I'm noticing this. I'm thinking, okay, these guys all look alike, basically. And, they're pitching this golf concept, this golf deal. And they were saying, well, we got to, I said to them, guys, Tiger Woods is a phenomenon who just showed, it was a recent phenomenon saying you've got nobody of color on your team. You've got no women on your team. I mean, come on, that's half the population. And then you've got nobody, in my experience in looking at golfers out on the golf course, most of them are older than 50, and you got nobody older than 40 on your team here. You've got you got 3/4 or what percentage of the golf demographic isn't even represented on your team. You don't have any advisors, you don't have any board members, you don't have anybody of anything that doesn't look like you. And so here I am going off on this, and I talk about this in the business plan itself. But the real thing is, in my own diverse team I had with 30 people, I had people from all kinds of backgrounds. And it never ceased to amaze me how I could see how to do something and get all excited about it, to have several people come to me and say, if you look at it like this, or look at it like that, or look at it like this, you're going to get a different perspective. And so from the perspective alone, the value is tremendous. And so it's not a matter of doing it because you have to. You do it because it makes sense, and you want to have a diverse team and include everybody because it just, well, it makes a better product. What can I say? So that's that. And then so back to the idea of that your business is a product. I like this slide because I love airplanes. But the idea is this: the DEA sells airplanes for half price. And why do you suppose the DEA would confiscate a nice, perfectly good DC-3 like this and sell it for half price? That plane's probably worth $1 million, but they sell it for half price. And they sell it for half price because it's got, hang on, I'm clicking here. Where's the next slide? It's got no logbooks. You don't know if those engines are run out. You don't know if it's ever been crashed. You have no idea what's up with this airplane. So you've got to assume, whoever buys this, assume that it's got everything wrong with it. It needs everything fixed because there's no documentation. And so what I'm talking about, why you want to have a business plan, you want to have an employee manual with your what was it? It was the you want to have the COVID policy in it. You want to have the HIPAA policy in it. You got to have all that. So that's all part of being buttoned up and having your act together and preventing yourself from being sued. But it's all that documentation in your plan where the employees, everybody working with you knows what's going on in your business. And this is where, when you go to sell this company down the road, if you've been documenting it along the way, you've got this in place and you can sell the business. Now, my shameless plug for the products that we've built that do exactly all of that are these software templates that enable you to write the employee handbook, have the public relations templates out there, have a marketing strategy, have your good agreements in place. In fact, all of our agreement templates have a clause in them. Think about the clauses and agreements that you have. You want to have that clause that says, I have a deal with you, but I can sell my company without your permission. In other words, I have the right to sell this company, and anybody who takes it on agrees to abide by our agreement. Because imagine if you were going to sell your company for $100 million and you had a deal with somebody, but you didn't have that clause in your agreement. You'd have to go to them and say, I'm about to sell my company for $100 million. Would you approve me selling our deal to them? What are they going to say? Yeah, sure. Give me $1 million and I'll do it. But you want to have that kind of clause in your agreements that allow you to sell it and move on without having those extra requirements for permission in there. Anyway, that's just an aside from one of the things that I discovered along the way. It's a lot of little things that you've got to have in there that just makes life in the future easier. So what you're doing here in working on your business as well as in your business, but the working on this business is it being the product that you're someday going to sell. You want to be able to start setting yourself up for that sale at the get-go. And that's why your business plan is a document you keep using and adding to it. It becomes the sales brochure when you go to sell this thing. Now, what we've evolved to now is this online dashboard where it's kind of like we've replaced and upgraded from business software to have an online platform where the business plan lives in this dashboard now. And now people could see that we really included a lot of other things with it. There's the Excel financial models in the middle here. There's some worksheets. There's the investor presentation is baked in. It's all there and very, quite frankly, I think easy to use. Now, what I saw, one of these slides I got from somebody, I think it was this one. This is what they show you that comes with their business plan template. Now, I could list my 20 questions I showed you earlier with blank sheets of paper and say, okay, answer the questions. Or I could give you this and say, this is what's in the executive team. We use this green type at the top to be some instructions on what to say, but there's a lot of text in the middle here, and the company name will fill in automatically, the industry will fill in automatically, a bunch of stuff fills in automatically, but the idea here is you've got an idea of what to say. And this is other thing, this is the rest of this page showing these are the list of your people. This is what investors want to know. They want to know how old these people are. They want to know how long you've been around. They want to know how many shares, how much skin you've got in the game. They want to know who your outside support is. They want to know who your advisors are. They want to know who your directors are. The advisors are people that you can call on the phone in a pinch and say, hey, I got a problem. What do I do? And so, there's you've got this extra kind of protection, if you will, and we even include some letters that say you want to send a letter to an advisor and say, hey, Bob, I'd like to invite you to be an advisor of my company. Here's what I want you to do. If you'd show up for a meeting once a month, or if I could call you for some advice, I'll give you 10,000 shares of stock. I'll give you 100,000 or options or stock restricted stock units or something for the privilege. You could give them cash, but the idea is to avoid paying cash. But you want to have a list of these people so the investors look at this and say, you've got some qualified, credible people here. In fact, I'm thinking there's a drone company lately that has a guy listed who's one of their advisors. His name is Burke Rutan. Burke Rutan is a famous aircraft designer. And you have this guy on your board of advisors. It's like, oh, you guys are serious. You've got a better team. And the thing about it is that what investors can often look at, a number of different ideas that come out. Like take electric cars, just because they're popular right now. So you could have an electric car company. You and a dozen other electric car companies are going to come to the investors and say, hey, we've got the greatest electric car company. We want you to invest. And they might look at your deal and think, well, that's great, but I'm looking at a dozen other electric car companies. Why you? This is the why you part. And this is so because they're going to invest. They'd rather invest in a B product with an A team than an A product with a B team. It's the people running the business that are going to make it successful and pull this thing off, which is why you've got to be very careful in selecting your team. Now, just an aside, I don't know where this came up in my thinking in the past, but the investors will do, especially the VCs, will do some serious due diligence on you and your team. They will check out your college. If you say you graduated from college, they will go to that college and make sure that you graduated from that college. And I have a friend who's a VC up north, and we went to boarding school together, the same school where the teacher would write, what do you mean by that? What are you talking about? Give me an example. Well, he got his ass kicked in that school just like I did. And anyway, he's a venture capitalist now. And I called him up and I said, hey, Peter, when you guys are doing due diligence on a company, how many things do you allow to be like off, like they didn't quite match up with what they said they were? And now, quick aside, in California schools, 90% you get 90% an A, 80% a B, 70% a C, 60% a D. Below that, you flunked it, right? In this boarding school, they give us more questions on a quiz, but if you got one wrong, it was a B, two wrong, it was a C, three wrong, you flunked it. And so the quality control in these tests was pretty gnarly, and it was really easy to fail. I got Fs for my entire first year. And that would talk about demoralizing and freaking me out, because I came from a school where I was getting A's and mostly A's, some B's, and here I was getting straight F's for practically an entire year. I was in tears until my advisor said, do you know how to study? And apparently I didn't. Anyway, but my friend Peter said, we don't give them any. One wrong, you flunked it. And I thought, whoa. So you really have to you need to think through what you're doing here, because these guys will check you out. They're betting a lot of money on you. And I beat this to death because this is important. This is a place where you could just be disqualified. And you practically want to, I don't think it's even going too far to call up a private investigator. I say call up a PI because they have access to all kinds of things, and do a quick check on your people. I'm not kidding. And so it sounds a little draconian, but it's not off the table, because you're playing the big leagues here, and these guys don't fool around, and you don't want to lose a deal because one of the people on your team did something stupid in the past that's you don't want to have there. So anyway, you got the idea. I don't beat it to death. Anyway, on a happy note, one of our clients used BizPlan Builder, and his plan was to, like many of us, I'm gonna go out and raise money, and I'm gonna buy the things I need to buy, and I'm gonna start the business. In his case, he wanted to start a jet charter service. And so he needed a Learjet, of course, to start a jet charter service. And his plan called for raising, I think, $4 or $5 million. He needed to go buy a jet, of course, place to park it and all that stuff. And he had a couple of partners that were going to start a jet charter service. And so he couldn't find any investors because this wasn't the kind of thing most investors would invest in. It's a giant asset. It's just one of them. How does this make any sense? However, so he called up and we were talking. I said, well, do you know anybody who's got a jet? And he said, he did know a guy who had 2 Learjets. They were in some leaseback program with some other jet charter service. Long story short, my guy took his business plan to the guy with the planes and said, here's my plan. And the guy says, I'm giving you my jets. My jets are in much better hands with you. And so now imagine how that changed everything. All of a sudden, he doesn't need the money to buy a couple of these beasts because they're, as you can imagine, they're expensive as hell. He had the 2 planes. Now how much money does he need to raise? Practically nothing. He needed some uniforms, an office, some brochures, a phone, stuff like that. But he sure as heck didn't need a couple of jets. Now his business is transformed completely because now his whole model is he's still in business. He's in Hayward, California, or maybe it's Oakland. He's actually moved to Oakland now. But he's got access to literally hundreds of airplanes because there's all these corporations and people who've got planes. They're not using them all the time. He just manages their planes. He charters them out and, rock and roll. So he's got a fleet of airplanes that he's got access to just because he was looking for a way to get the thing he needed. He didn't need to go get the money to get the thing he needed. So that's one thing we talk about in the plan and along the way is how can you get what you need without having to go get a bunch of money first to do it. Okay, so hold that thought. And the other variation on this theme is revenue royalties. And I did this with an investor where part of the deal is in years 5 through 10, he gets 1% of my top line revenue. There's no Hollywood accounting. Hollywood accounting is where you offer somebody a percentage of your profits. Well, your profits can vanish after you make your car payments and buy a jet for yourself and do whatever else you do. So you don't want to have any of that. You want to have the money off the top. It's like what they do, with movie actors. They get points on the movie. They get points on their gross revenue. And so that's what this is. You're getting points on the gross. So this is just some examples. 0.5% of revenue on years 6 through 10, and it could drop to 0.1% of revenue in years 11 through 20. So you can be very creative with this. And you can put together, it could be a loan. The idea here, if you do pure revenue royalties and don't sell any stock in the company, you have no fiduciary responsibility legally from a stock, a whole SEC perspective on, being mindful of shares in the business. Here you're paying somebody a royalty. Now, don't get off on the weeds on the legalities of that, but it's much, much simpler. And the other plain straight up fact is that a lot of these investors are getting older, especially some of the angels. They can't wait for you to run your business for 10 years and finally sell it and make their money. They want to get some money back now, so they put their money in, and then they want to get as much of that. They want to recoup the capital. So another point on that too to consider is that any money you take from investors, this is golden. I've heard people say, oh, the guy's so rich he doesn't care about money. I beg to differ. More I know about more people with more money. As I make more money, the more I care about it. So the fact that they're making a lot of money doesn't mean they don't care about money. They care very much about the money.
Hey, Burke.
Yeah.
We're running up against the time frame here.
I'm at the end here, just about.
Okay.
So I'm just saying, the part of the thing, even with it's a stock investment or revenue royalty investment or a loan or anything, you want to think about how can I pay back the money they've given me, pay that back right away, and protect it with everything you've got. And then after that, the return on that investment, that's gravy on top of the whole thing. But they've got to get the money they put in. That's the part that's sacrosanct. And that's the part you need to really respect and show them how they're going to get that money back fast. Okay, so anyway, I've got this free ebook that's available to you. You can get it. I put a link in the chat where you can get, well, there's this, and I put a link in the chat where you can get this kind of cool spreadsheet from us. It's it's a personal thing. There's a variation in the business plan. Of course, we've got these totally flexible Excel models that you can work with. They've evolved over 30 years. But the idea here, of course, is you list all the stuff you want to buy. What's it cost? What's the financing? Is there maintenance? And you can see down at the bottom, if I got the 3,000,006 in the bottom of the dark green column to make all the cash down payments, then we reverse engineer based on if I invested the money, paid the taxes, I'd have to get $10 million to spend 3.6 million, invested at 10%, pay 39% taxes, and I could buy all this stuff on my list. And of course, if you sold a business, you'd need to pay off the capital gains, which I think are currently 15%. But all the green numbers you can change. So those you can change. But this idea here is to figure out how much money do you really need? Because I was sitting there, one day in my office reading about these billionaires thinking, man, how much hard is it going to be? How much work am I going to have to do? And well, this is where this was born. So, and then I also have written a book. You can see this stuff on my website. I've taken a lot of things that I've talked to you about here and written it down because I felt like it was important things for people to know along the way in building your business. It's just not just raising capital. You got to raise the money and then you got to stay in business and you've got to get as far down the road so you can sell it. And that is it for me. Is there any questions?
And feel free to unmute yourself and come off camera, or come on camera rather, to ask your questions, or you can also put them in the chat and I will relay them for you.
I have one, Burke. A lot of times folks are really reluctant to give away equity in their firms. How do you recommend that people look at the possibility of equity for investors? Do you have like some things that folks should consider or have on their minds in that process?
The revenue royalties are the direct answer to that. You're offering people a percentage of sales. And I put in 0.1%, but you can do the math on that and figure out, okay, what might this look like? Then it's a matter of convincing them what the revenue is going to be, and then how can you engineer it in a way where they get their capital back right away as soon as possible, maybe over a few years, but at least it's coming back to them, it's trickling back to them. Then at some point they're paid off, and then either you can accelerate it and give them more after that, or you can give them less, whatever. And then figure out basically what does that mean in terms of what's the net present value of all that money over time, and they can see what the return on investment is and give it to you. The real sales pitch in there is saying you're going to get your money back right away, or starting sooner than when maybe we go public or I sell the company. You don't have to wait that long. That's really the way to do it. And the guy who created this whole thing, Arthur Lipper, was a famous Wall Street guy, and he talks about you don't want to have any investors getting stuck. If you can get all of them to do revenue royalties, then you don't have this onus of SEC, all that stuff that you need to do. Does that make sense?
Yeah, thanks.
What else? Other questions? I can stop my share here and we can see each other if I can do that.
Yeah, were there any other questions for Burke before we wrap it up today?
It all makes sense. I'm presuming it did. I don't know. It makes sense to me, but I want to make sure it makes sense to you guys. Are you all working on business plans? Is anybody working on a business plan? I can't hear anybody.
Brian, are you speaking?
No.
Oh, okay.
I've got a business plan started, but I'm just for a couple of ideas. I'm just okay, needing to move forward. You just kind of caught me right as this presentation caught me right as I'm ready to start thinking about getting a couple of products out the door.
Yeah, cool. Well, I hope this helps.
And Burke, I've noticed in the chat here that there was Karen that had mentioned that the link was not actually added to the chat. So perhaps it was just sent out to one person, maybe if they had direct messaged you. But if you don't mind reposting that.
Yeah, okay. I don't know what I did. It looks like I didn't post it to everyone. My bad. So let me. How could I have done that?
Just one of those, technology gremlins.
God, I mean, not like we don't use this thing every single day. I just didn't see the
Right.
everyone thing on there. Okay, now how about now?
What do you say, Burke, about how people can meet investors? How do you vet them to find the right fit people and meet them?
Well, there's these directories of venture capitalists, but I so many times I think that's you've got to have the right deal for a VC, I think, But I would go, there's always some kind of entrepreneurial group. I mean, you guys got this right here. I would imagine between you, Liz, you work for the SBDC, and James, there's got to be investors who are poking around, like, you got anything good here? But you've got people, have got lawyers and accountants who know investors. You ask around, they take off different shapes and sizes. It never ceases to amaze me. I go to these things in town, meetups, where there's entrepreneurs, and there's investors they're not going to come out and go, I am an investor, big target on them, because everybody's going to come after them. They're hiding out. But if they get a whiff that you're doing something interesting, looking for an investment, and it happens to be something that they're interested in, I mean, angels typically want to invest within about 25 miles of where they live. They want to invest in something that they're familiar with, because they're looking for something to do. It's like it's an emotional investment. Venture capitalists are much more disciplined, and so I'd say you want to look for angels, and you just keep asking around. And so, but like I said, if you ask for advice, you're more likely to get the money versus than asking for money, because everybody's got their hand out. Can I get some money? Can I get some money? It's like, no. Can I get some advice? Well, let me see what you got. And then, I mean, a freakish thing happened with my mom. Of course, it's my mom, but I find sometimes getting money from friends and family is harder than from strangers or from professionals. I had my mom read my executive summary. Because I know she's the kind of person, and my relationship would be, I could do 100 things, out of 100 things, I could do 99 things right. And my mom would go, you missed this one thing. I'm thinking, why can't you just acknowledge me on how smart I am for the 99 I got right? No, but I want to make it better. I want to pick out the one thing you missed. So I'm thinking, who better to look at my executive summary than a person who's going to do that? So sure enough, I'm asking, would you just read this and find the one thing wrong that I didn't do? Well, she ends up writing, so I'll give you, what she said was, instead of finding anything wrong, she goes, I'll give you $10,000. Maybe I got over it, something like that. But there it was. But it goes to saying, you ask for advice. Everybody wants to give advice. So I'm looking for some angel kind of wealthy guys who can give me some advice on this business idea. Or if you've got an airplane idea, do you know anybody who's with airplanes who can tell me about this airplane business? Who knows? If they've got airplanes, they probably got money.
And just to plug, you asked earlier, what connections we do have. Just to go back to that Thurston Investment Network, that's a membership-based organization sponsored by the Thurston EDC that does invest in companies statewide. So we do help at the CBNI. We do help prepare investors to give that pitch, and we help put them in front of those investors. So if somebody is interested here on the line or in the future, please reach out to me directly, and I can help get you connected into that line.
Also in our area, we have the Seattle Angel Network, which has a competition once or twice a year, a pitch competition that involves prize money, and it is a chance to meet investors as well. So we have lots of good resources. Yeah, the Think Network, which recruits and trains investors, and they want to invest in local businesses. Yeah, in Washington. And the same can be said for the Seattle Angel Network. They offer trainings in how to pitch and such. And then they have their annual pitch competition with prize money, which is a great opportunity for exposure as well.
Nice.
The other cool thing about that is I think it's not the only thing in Washington. The investment network in Seattle isn't either. There are networks around the state that we are wrapped into that we can get people from all parts of the state connected to. So again, just feel free to reach out to me directly. And my email address is jdavis@thurstonedc.com.
The thing I would say about this too is I have another video on my site that you can watch. It's a little overlap with this one, but mainly it's about what can you do to build your business without outside capital. I used to teach business planning at this organization, and we'd ask the people, so what do you need next? And it's, oh, I need money. Well, they didn't have business cards yet. They didn't have a brochure. They didn't have a business plan. They couldn't explain what they were doing in 30 seconds. I said, you don't need money to do any of those things. There's lots of things you need to do that you need to do before you raise the money. In fact, the more you can do without money, like if you can get a deal on Learjets, or you can get a deal on some office space, which I'm sure there's lots of office space suddenly available. Let's say you need some. You could probably use your business plan to wangle a deal there. And what can you do to build a business without money? Because when you get down to the part in the slide in the presentation or this page in your business plan that says, here's the traction I've got so far, here's what I've been able to accomplish with what little I have, that can be quite impressive. And when the investor sees that, they go, wow, I wonder what you could do if you had some money. Obviously you're frugal, you do as much as you can without it, but it just goes to the mindset. There's some of these businesses. I remember the .com crash. I mean, you can't take your $1 investment and go out and buy a sock puppet Super Bowl commercial. It's just, there's no other word for it besides stupid, So anyway, and there's some other company, they raised $50,000 and they had a big party, and then nothing. They crashed because there's no money left. So you've got to really think about how can you do as much of this without raising capital, and at least have enough things in place so that when you do raise capital, there's somewhere to go with it.
The other thing I see, Burke, so often is that you don't know how much money you really need until you do the business plan process, right? You don't know how much to ask for that'll actually get you to that break-even point or that profitability point. So you've got to do the exercise of writing your business plan and doing your cash flow projections in order to know how much you really should be asking for.
Well, to your point, we found in the Excel model, we built it. It kind of works two ways. There's the bottom up, which means you build it with what needs to be, like what you're saying. There's the top down. Well, we'll do this, a percentage of this. Okay, but there's a page in there. It's kind of like that page I showed you here. What are all the things that I need? I need advertising. I need a CPA. I need accounting software. I need a computer. I need a truck. I need But the way it's done is like there's a list of stuff, but across the top are month. You don't need all this stuff right now in month one. You're showing I need a truck here. I'm going to need another truck next year or whatever. Or I'm going to hire these people. I need a tech support person day one. I'm not going to need another tech support person till month 6, and then I'm going to need 3 of them in month 8. And so you're seeing this thing build up, and you're watching, you're kind of mapping out how it's growing, but you're adding up all the stuff you need to build the business. I need this much inventory here, and I need more later, because what the investors are going to ask for is, well, let me see your use of funds page. Well, what we do is we take this bottom up page, kind of like your shopping list of everything you can imagine, and then we just summarize it on the use of funds page. Now, if the investor looks at it and goes and buys into it, goes, yep, that's good. More often than not, they're going to say, well, you're asking for $1 million. What can you do with 100,000? That's where you go back to the plan and start shaving and taking things out. But you can go to the page where you have all the stuff that you're building up to and say, okay, what can I move out? When do I need the money? And you can really think that through in an intelligent way. In an intelligent way, you could explain to any investor, and when they see what you've done and how you're thinking about it, that tells them a whole bunch about what kind of business person you are and how you think through this stuff logically and add it up, and you're doing the math. And because the financial model really is a big arithmetic model, driven by a narrow bunch of assumptions. And we show you how you do these assumptions. There's another software product out there that grab the graph by one of its points and drag it, and it'll fill in all the numbers. I defy you to explain to any investor how you got there from here because you dragged a graph to make the graph look pretty, versus explaining, like, here's a universe of customers. Like, I have an example there, like sailboats. And it starts out with an empirical, factual block of numbers, like sailboat owners, 350,000. When the guy's doing the due diligence, you could look up and they'll go to Sailing Magazine, and they've got a mail list of 350,000 sailboat owners. I'm making that up, but that's how that works. You can prove that you've got a certain universe of people. Then the part that gets arguable or negotiable is the next block that says, what market share of that do I think I'm going to get? And then do the math, and it says, okay, how many units am I going to sell? Or how many customers am I going to get? A lot of people would rather say, well, I'm going to get this many customers, and then let the system do the math and tell them what market share that is. I just want to get people thinking in terms of the way investors look at it, like, tell me what your market share is, and then we'll tell me what that translates to in money. Because they look at it and go, what market share is believable? And then the rest starts growing. You can start to see how this revenue model starts. Because these VCs on this panel I was with, everybody in the competition would say, our first year we're going to do $1 million. And I said to the VCs, I said, on the break, I said, is it just me, or does everybody do $1 million in their first year? And they laughed. They said, you'd be amazed at how often entrepreneurs come in and pitch their deal and tell us they're going to do $1 million in the first year, and they have absolutely no idea how they got there from here. And that's disastrous. I mean, you do not pass go and collect $1 million. You're done.
You just can't pick an arbitrary number and throw it up there and say that's where we're going. You have to show something. You got to have some substance to it.
Start with something real. Like, there's this many people in the world who have the problem, and here's where they are, because I can reach them this way, and it's unarguable. So I want to have as many unarguable things in there as possible, because there's plenty of places it's going to be negotiable, but at least anchor it in something real. And that's what's crucial. So dragging a graph to fill in numbers, I think, is a recipe for disaster.
It's actually a red flag for investors and for bankers too, even if you're going after a loan. If your numbers are too round or too even, they know they're not real numbers. So you really want to dial in what the real numbers are.
If we could sell of all this, we could sell 1% of everybody in China one thing. Come on. You can't say you're going to sell 1% or 10%. It's got to be like for myself, if there's 300, according to Babson College and Babson in the London School, there's 388 million businesses in the world. And I say, I'd like 1 million subscribers paying me $50 a month. Okay, I can live on that. But a million subscribers is 0.26% market share of the entire 388 million businesses in the world. You see how that, if I got 0.26% of 388 million, that's like, well, that's believable. What does that mean? Well, it means a million. It means 1 million subscribers. So I'm just saying that's different ways of looking at of presenting those numbers, but it's got to be based on something real.
Awesome. Well, this has been a very packed ScaleUp Mastermind tonight. I thank you very much, Burke, for joining us. Without any other questions for Burke, I think I'm going to go ahead and call it a night, you guys. I'm going to add this to the ScaleUp Mastermind YouTube channel, so it will be available later for viewing, as well as so you'll be able to reference it later. Burke, is that slideshow available for sharing?
Yeah, well, you certainly can replay the video. I'm happy for you.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. I just had that question earlier.
Yeah.
So, but thank you so much, Burke. We really appreciate your insight. It's obvious that you come from a very deep knowledge background, and I think there are so many things that I'm still ruminating over that I'm going to be definitely watching the video again.
Sorry, it's just like bam, 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 like they're all over the place. But they do all kind of add up to how you are with investing. The other thing I didn't say was that you do the formal pitch, and then what? Well, then there's 100 conversations over lunch, over the phone, over coffee, because the investors, they call up their technical contact, and they call up their marketing guy, they call their friend from college and say, hey, I got this guy in here who's pitching me a thing. I know you know something about it. What do you think? Who knows who they're going to put all these different perspectives and ideas and things. And there's like literally like 100 conversations that happen after the formal pitch, and that's where you win or lose the deal. You have to have your act together in those conversations, where you're being aware of why they're asking the question, and what's a nice person like you. Oh, there's another one, and there, like I talked about how many of you are disruptors. Oh, I'm disruptive. Well, you want to be careful if you've watched enough television. You want to be careful who you disrupt. For example, I know these guys who tried to mitigate some trash in Las Vegas. Well, most garbage in most cities is run by the mob. So if you've got something to mitigate garbage somewhere, you really got to go talk to the mob boss or somebody who's in charge. I'll just put it that way. Take the mob out of that idea, but you got to go talk to whoever's in charge of that, because you do not want to run afoul of certain people who don't take kindly to you and your little friends disrupting them. Just saying. So. Anyway.
Well, looks like we lost James.
Yeah. I've lots of fun little anecdotes to share. I could go on, but I'll leave you guys alone.
Thank
again,
you
Burke.
so much, Burke. That was awesome. Appreciate all the good intel. For any of you, if you need follow-up information for James, for the EDC, for Burke or I, I'll put my email in the chat as well.
I think
so
James
just follow up, let us know.
All right, you guys. Liz, thanks for the intro. I appreciate it.
Yeah.
And, we'll talk later, I guess. If you guys have any questions, call me up. You've got my email address on the chat. Susan, you had a question?
No, I was saying thank you.
Oh, you're just waving goodbye. Okay. Never know. All right.
Thanks all.
Thanks
Good
again.
night.
See you later.